many of us ever know what it is to become the perfect version of ourselves.
This is Decoding Superhuman with your host, Boomer Anderson.
Why, hello there, Superhumans. Boomer Anderson here, your host of the Decoding Superhuman podcast. Happy Podcast Day. And today, we're going to celebrate a trip I took about 5, maybe even 8 years ago to a float tank. And during that time, I was going through a period of high stress. And at the recommendation of my boss, I went to a float tank here in Amsterdam. And that experience was absolutely profound, both in terms of relaxation, but also in terms of shutting off my mind. So talking about flotation tanks on the podcast has been something that I've wanted to do for a very long time. It was just a matter of finding the right guest. And so today, I've found that person, and his name is Michael Cordova. As always on this podcast, we really like to separate truth from false and to give you those bite-sized pieces of scientifically backed, actionable information. And Michael's able to do it when it comes to float tanks. So who is Michael? Michael Cordova's purpose is to make a positive contribution to humankind by providing the tools to improve physical and mental well-being. He wants to create a safe environment for personal growth. He is also the co-founder, TEDx speaker, and float facilitator at Floating Point Float Center in Berkshire in the United Kingdom. This is an award-winning business that's helped over 5,000 people in the last 3 years, including the British rowing team, that's the Olympic rowing team, the world's strongest woman, as well as Great Britain's track and field athletes. And from a guy across the pond, it's very cool to see that Britain's actually taking advantage of a lot of these technologies. Michael sees floating as an antidote to our 24/7 digital lives. So yes, you, that's still using the BlackBerry and connected to it all the time. And it's a way to alter our ingrained behaviors for a more positive and productive life. This conversation was absolutely fascinating to me. As I've mentioned, I found floating to be one of the best ways for me to just totally shut off. We talked about and really get into, for those who are not experienced with it, what is floating? What are some of the benefits? We do a deep dive into the scientific research on floating. And then finally, we talk about some of those psychedelic effects that you may face or feel when you're in the float tank. And don't worry, you shouldn't be scared about that. And lastly, Michael and I get into, of course, the final 5 questions. The show notes for this one can be found at decodingsuperhuman.com/float. But I encourage you to stick it out to the end here because we really, really go deep on the float tank. Enjoy this one, Superhumans, and have an absolutely wonderful and epic day. Sponsor for this episode is the ring on my finger. No, I'm not married yet, and frankly, before this ring, I hated wearing rings. But I must say, the guys at Oura have done a great job. The Oura ring allows me to track all sorts of crazy things about my sleep, including my resting heart rate, my deep sleep stages, my REM sleep, etc., etc. I really enjoy the feedback, and it allows me to make lifestyle decisions to become a higher performer. Let me give you an example. So prior to getting the Oura ring, I would fast essentially 16 hours after my last meal. It didn't matter when that last meal was. However, when I look at my resting heart rate and how that really correlates to my performance the next day, I know I want my lowest resting heart rate coming as soon as possible after going to sleep, because that's when all my recovery really starts. So what did I do? Well, it allowed me to adjust really when my last meal was before going to bed. So I have my last meal now earlier in the night. I get better sleep, I get higher quality sleep, and I must say the next day feels amazing. So if you want to check out the Oura ring, and if you want to pick one up yourself, go to auraring.com. That's OURA ring.com. Plug in the code BOOMER and you'll get $50 off your order or 50 euros depending on your jurisdiction. I really hope you enjoy the ring, and on with the show. Michael, so good to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Boomer. It's a pleasure. It's going to be great to be able to talk to you a bit more about floating and all the great benefits, man.
Well, you kind of spoiled the surprise there, but the floating side of things, I'm really glad to have you on because it's a topic that and frankly a technology that I've used for a long time, but I wanted to have the right person on to talk about really the scientific benefits behind this flotation tank therapy. And you're the right guy, so I'm really excited to dive into this today. But Michael, let's dive right in. What is, I guess, for the uninitiated, the people who haven't had the pleasure of this experience, what is flotation therapy?
Well, I'd say that floating is essentially a way of achieving deep relaxation, basically, usually by spending an hour or more lying quietly in darkness, suspended in a warm solution of Epsom salt water that's basically heated to around skin temperature. So that stimulates zero gravity, basically. So this basically, the tanks allow the user to disconnect from the outside world, and they enter a deeper meditative state and can experience nothingness in its purest form, basically.
We're going to get into a lot of what you just said and dive a little bit deeper here in a second, but I'm always curious how people come to discover flotation or sensory deprivation tanks, because, myself, I was referred to it by a former boss, and I would love to hear your story on how you came to this.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question, man. It's more of I'd say it was more of a happy accident, really. So I was living and working in a very stressful job in London. So we were working with kids that had been permanently excluded from schools. So it was a physically and emotionally draining job, to be honest. And I'd be traveling around London from week to week, with no kind of real base. So obviously a combination of travel, being on the underground constantly. So I wasn't really that happy at the time either as well. Personally, I wasn't in the best place, to be honest. The job was kind of emotionally, physically challenging as well. And, being in London, just it was constant, all the time. So it's just, I needed something to kind of break that up, just to kind of reset myself. But at the time, my wife came into my life, and that kind of, at that point, I felt as though I had a purpose, basically. And we were both on kind of a journey, and we were supporting each other because we were both working in the same field. We tried yoga and meditation classes. We tried other different therapies as well, but we actually found it very difficult to kind of commit to a regular class because we were in different parts of London all the time, week to week. So I listened to a podcast by Joe Rogan.
Oh, I actually remember that. And
yeah.
And I think Joe Rogan was one of the reasons why I got into it more seriously rather than just a one-off. But I think I remember that podcast episode very well.
Yeah, the video, I've always seen the float centers, and we put that video out a few times as well. And we always get a lot of interest, and he's a great kind of ambassador for floating as well. But it's the thing that kind of intrigued me, and I've always had a love for being in water as well. So I thought this is a bit of a no-brainer, really. So I thought, okay, well, we need to try it. And we found a centre in London, and I have to tell you, it blew my mind, man. It totally blew my mind. It was something else. The only way I can describe it really is that I saw lots of colours, shapes, faces. I felt this total kind of disconnect from the outside world. It was like this huge weight being lifted off my shoulders. And I felt amazing after that, man. I had the best sleep I had in a long while. And I remember saying to my wife, when our wife Tina, that we had to do that again. As soon as we left, I'm like, yeah, we have to book that in soon. And even on the way back, it was kind of I kind of knew after that first float session that we were going to open our own centre one day. And then we did 5 years later, and many floats later as well, obviously. But it's had a huge kind of impact, not just on my life, but obviously my wife as well, that we've made massive changes, and we see that in our behavior, our level of confidence, the way we interact with people. We're doing things that we wouldn't have done before. So, man, yeah, it's made a huge impact, and we wanted to obviously share that with everybody else. And we thought, you know what, why aren't more people doing this? And yeah, so that's why we opened, and yeah, just help as many people as we possibly can.
I think it's your experience sounds a lot like my first experience, where I had quite a stressful job. And the first time I actually tried it was in Amsterdam, before I actually lived in Amsterdam. And I remember just being told by my boss at the time, hey, you should check this place out. And the experience was much like yours. I went in, and it was, aside from really some winter sports, it's very hard for me to shut off my mind. Now it's a little bit better. But, I think floating was probably one of the other experiences where I was actually able to shut it off and just kind of enjoy. And so that feeling is one that is elusive to many high performers and one that I absolutely enjoyed. But you touched on some of the benefits to yourself. Let's talk about generalized benefits, since now you have the center. And what I love about you and the things you do is you do a lot of research behind this. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk a little bit about really the benefits that you've seen not only with your clients, but just sort of the generalized benefits or why somebody should consider a flotation tank.
There's kind of two reasons, really. I mean, it's mainly obviously the physical and the mental well-being. Obviously, they're the core kind of areas that we look at. So, like, for example, for us, we have a lot of people that float for chronic conditions, so chronic back and joint problems. We have injury recovery for athletes. We have people that come in for post-operative recovery. People that have like stress, anxiety, depression, burnout. Even with a lot of the athletes that we work with will come in for maybe like pre-competition visualization. People come in to improve their meditation, cognitive function, or you can use it as a tool for learning and like reflection, basically.
So on the learning and reflection side, is that a lucid dreaming kind of?
I think basically what we're looking at in terms of the learning and reflection aspect, it's okay. So I'll give you this little summary because it's not. I think it fits really well. But basically, floating is a bit like going on a date with yourself, a naked date, to be precise, really. But if you think about it, like once the outside world is shut out and your sense is, your sense of time and space basically disappear. So all you're left with is you and your mind. So, like to many people, that sounds kind of scary, an hour or more of just you and your thoughts. But the thing is we actually, especially in the modern day society, we do need to learn how to kind of reconnect with ourselves basically, because we are connected 24/7. And we seem to have this level of disconnect with our inner selves. So it's nice to stay, and it's really important to be able to have time alone with yourself. With the learning aspect, like we've had clients, for example, that have been floating with us for a year, and then they've been using it as kind of a meditation reflective practice, for example. And then they've decided, after a year, they're going, I'll stuff it. I'm fed on my job. And they've kind of just gone, okay, well, I'm going to leave, and they've left and they've moved country. Obviously, that's not a great thing for us, but for him, it's amazing, Mm-hmm. And I've had the clients that come in and they've been like, and they reach a point, and they have these really stressful managerial roles, and they get to a point where it's like, suddenly something sort of falls into place and it just makes sense, and then they're like, okay, why am I getting stressed out about stuff? It's most of it they have no control over anyway. So now he's kind of looking at doing his personal training course. He's selling his flat. He's going to buy a houseboat. He's getting rid of his car. He's buying a motorbike. He's got rid of a few toxic people in his life. And he's looking at making massive changes. And this is just based on his kind of regular floats, and it puts you into a place where it kind of subconsciously, there's different thoughts and things that will come up into your mind that you weren't necessarily aware of, or certain things that you may have been suppressing. So the idea is it's about kind of relinquishing control when you're in the float session. Mm-hmm. Once there's that, you let go of that. Right, it's having that freedom. I think that's what a lot of people, not all the time, but sometimes that's why sometimes it takes a bit longer for people to get into float sessions. It's about learning to let go and not have control. Because once you kind of don't have that, the amount of freedom you feel, it's very liberating, because you can only control certain things. So if you let go of the stuff you can't control of, like honestly, man, it just frees your mind and the rest of your life up like dramatically. It's huge.
There are only certain things in life we can control, and I think, is it Viktor Frankl that said our reaction is the only thing that we can control? But okay, this is very, very helpful, Michael. Now, let's get in a little bit more of the science, because you and I have exchanged emails on this before. I've spent a bit of time dancing around PubMed on this one, but do you mind going into some of the research behind these flotation tanks? Well, I guess flotation tanks, or as I see on PubMed, it's sometimes referred to restricted environmental stimulation technique. But do you mind just diving in?
Yeah, literally. Good pun there, man.
That was actually an unintended pun, by the way.
Yeah, it'd be quite shallow. I probably wouldn't recommend diving in, but health and safety alert, people. But,
not head first.
Oh no. But yeah, let's have a look at it there. I mean, I'll give you, for those people listening that are not necessarily fully aware, I'll give a quick kind of synopsis of where it came from. And then just give you a minute. I'll talk to you about all of the other studies and things that have been coming up as well. But I mean, flotation, has been around obviously a long time, since 54. So John Lilly was an American neuroscientist. So he built the first upright tank to study the effects of sensory deprivation on the mind. So he wanted to basically test the behaviorist model to see if any mental activity would cease if all stimuli was absent. So instead of turning off the mind state and they continue to have experiences independent of external sensory stimuli. There's an interesting book that Lilly wrote talking about the meta-programming and the human biocomputer, which it's quite an in-depth read, but if you get the chance to read it, definitely read it. It's also about his experiments with LSD and floating and things in the 60s as well. So
yeah, I'll link to this book as well as everything else in the show notes, cool. And we'll make sure that people are able to get a hold of it if they want the read.
I mean, he basically decided, he was looking at, or thinking of the body as kind of hardware and the mind as software, so programmable instructions determining how the information flowing through the system. Basically, the human biocomputer is to be processed, resulting in experiences of thought and emotion. So that's kind of where it originally started from, and then there was obviously a little bit of a journey, and then we come to kind of modern day, where it's kind of been like more of a resurgence, I would say, the last maybe 6-7 years. But yeah, I mean, there's also a wealth of research and new studies that are being undertaken as well to show how floating can benefit us. So Justin Feinstein and his team from the Laureate Institute of Brain Research discovered in preliminary studies in 2016 that floating has a similar effect to anti-anxiety drugs on the brain, which is pretty interesting.
That's pretty big for this audience. I mean, this is how I actually got into floating a little bit, was some of the work around, or some of the science around general anxiety disorder.
Yeah, I mean that was based in 2016. So if I jump ahead to now, so like this year, in fact, which is the most recent study called Examining the Short-Term Anxiolytic and Antidepressant Effects of Flotation and Rest by Dr. Justin Feinstein, which they've got a dedicated float facility at the Laureate Institute of Brain Research in Tulsa. So it's so they've got MRIs, they can measure EEGs, they do like all sorts of testing during like float sessions, basically. So in this new study, it was found basically in the primary outcome measures that the float experience induced a reduction in self-reported state anxiety that was evident across all 50 participants. Moreover, when compared to the non-anxious reference sample, the anxious group's post-float state anxiety approached the non-anxious levels. I mean, it's interesting because across the different pre- and post-float measures, there are also a number of significant effects that found in that anxious sample. They found there was a significant reduction, and that was observed in levels of anxiety, stress, muscle tension, pain, depression, and negative effects. Plus, there was also a substantial improvement in the mood characterized by increases in serenity, relaxation, happiness, positive effects over well-being, energy levels, feeling well refreshed, content, and peaceful. So this is just sort of a sample study of like 50 people. And this is just based on one float session. That's not even, and these are 50 highly anxious people. Now, if you look at float tanks, and they have like float rooms, float pods, there's all sorts of different kind of float devices. Some of them have like open float rooms as well. So we deal with clients that come in as well, and they come in. Some of them are highly anxious, and they want to leave the float lid open or leave partially open. What's kind of interesting is that the first day, like, I don't want to close the lid, or I might leave it partially open. But after about 30 seconds, there's no problem. They'll close the lids, and it's really interesting because you think, okay, well, these people are anxious, and it's a brand new environment, and yeah, you think, well, at any point, these people could get out if they wanted to, but they don't, and they stay in the tank for an hour, and it's kind of like, it's quite amazing to see the difference between before and afterwards, even if they haven't necessarily done like a study with us, but you can see the visual difference on their faces, and the way they talk. So this kind of study basically kind of highlights obviously all the really good positive effects that that a lot of float centers that we all talk about as within the float industry.
Awesome. This is great, Michael. We'll link to this study in the show notes. It's fantastic. And I think the important thing to highlight here is that whether it's anxiety or some cases pain, there is a lot of science behind this. And not only that, it's just damn relaxing. And for people out there that haven't tried it, you definitely want to get into a tank and float. Now, I want to talk a little bit more on the performance side, if you don't mind.
Fine.
Because we have a lot of high performers listening here, particularly in the corporate world, but also in athletics. You've worked with a few athletic teams, and I know there's been a few prominent teams, one of which is my favorite baseball team, that has used flotation tanks regularly. Do you mind just touching on how these athletes have used it? Or if you're willing to share who you've worked with and what benefits that they see.
Yeah, sure. Well, over the last 2 years, we've worked with a number of different athletes. So we've worked with quite a lot of elite athletes at the moment, but we also have our kind of semi-professional amateur athletes as well. So they all get the same kind of benefits. Obviously, it's slightly different degrees depending on their training program and how much they need to kind of recover, basically. But yeah, I mean, we're basically associate partners with British Rowing. So that means that we support all our current and future Olympic rowers. I think we're the only float centre in the UK to have like an official contract with Olympic athletes, which is good. Always a bonus. So yeah, we have them. We have Farah Fonseca. So she's the world's strongest woman in the lightweight category.
That's pretty incredible.
And we have a few GB and England track and field athletes as well. We've had a few of the women and men's England rugby sevens team in as well. So obviously that's in the UK, but if you're listeners in the US, you've got people like Stephen Curry, Tom Brady, there's guy Yasin Dubin, who's an American ultramarathon runner, but he floats for like pre-race visualization and preparation as well. And then you've got there's the Chicago Cubs and there's New England Patriots, obviously Golden State Warriors use them, Olympic athlete, gymnast Ali Raisin uses them as well. And the interesting thing is, especially for the guys in the US, for the US teams, since they started using the float tanks, or during the first season of using their float tanks incorporated as part of their recovery and training program, they've all won the major leagues.
Yeah.
So I think that it's great that the teams are shifting and kind of using and looking at various different other ways to support athletes, because every single 1 or even 0.5% can make the difference between a win and a loss, right? So,
and I would just say, particularly on the Cubs, and sorry to interrupt you, Michael,
yeah.
I am so glad they discovered it, because it's been almost over a century since they won the World Series, and then their manager, John Madden, brought in the float tanks, and it was amazing. I remember watching that at 5 a.m. in Amsterdam when they won the World Series. So if it was 100% attributed to float tanks, that's pretty awesome.
I mean, I think it definitely has an element. There's definitely plays quite a big part. I mean, there's 3 different areas I think that sports teams and athletes float, to be honest with you. So these are kind of recovery time, stress reduction, and mental training, which are obviously all the 3 core things that kind of underpin what it is to be an athlete. If you're a full-time athlete, then it's hard going. If I speak to the guys that come from the British Rowing team, they're training maybe 5.5, 6 days a week. And that's the gym or rowing or whatever. It's or ergs. It's crazy, man. It's just it's intense.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, for example, with regards to the recovery time. Floating would help to reduce the total amount of recovery time needed by increasing blood circulation, lowering lactic acid levels, and alleviating the pain of injuries, for example. So what you're doing is by relieving the gravitational pressure, the blood is obviously able to circulate more freely, reach joints, tendons, muscles, and ligaments, and maybe you sore or injured. So, I mean, this increased circulation allows our body to carry away waste and biochemicals such as lactic acid as well. We know lactic acid accumulates in the muscles during intense physical activity and can cause pain, tightness, and cramping, right? So in addition to reducing the amount of negative biochemicals and increasing the good ones, floating can also provide athletes with pain relief. So there's the release of natural endorphins coupled with the ability to become incredibly aware of knots, tensions and painful spots allows for athletes to heal faster and overcome fatigue, or they might notice, like we've had other clients that come in and they may notice other like pains and aches in other parts of the body that may have been basically overcompensating for a particular injury. So highlighting those things is just as important as just having the recovery and the rest and the relaxation aspect. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect sense.
So I mean, the stress aspect is obviously is really important as well, and I think and even for like people who are working in high end like managerial kind of roles and high end like top positions, obviously stress management is at the utmost importance. Basically, when an athlete experiences an abnormal amount of stress, then there's the high possibility of suffering from depression, apathy, decreased self-esteem, irritability, weight loss, increased vulnerability to injuries, and impaired performance. Now, flow therapy has been used successfully in clinical stress management. Has been found to reduce blood pressure, cortisol levels, and other stress-related neurochemicals such as adrenaline and ACTH, basically as well.
So just on this, and I think it's important for people to recognize this, whether you're an executive traveling all over the world and constantly stressed out, or you're an athlete working out, as you mentioned, 5 to 6 days a week, hitting the erg all the time, the stress on the nervous system is relatively the same. And so one of these ways to relieve, and one of the reasons why, Michael, I wanted you to come on the show, is to explain to people this exact study that we're talking about, is because it can help help you get your cortisol back into regulation, all this kind of stuff. But again, sorry I interrupted you again, Michael, but thank you for sharing that.
Sorry, man. I mean, we know that these all the neurochemicals that are known to trigger the fight or flight response. Which is in this paper by Hutchinson as well. Booz and al. From like 2006. It's very good for lifting the truck. Obviously having this high level stress, so for being able to lift the truck up a track body or tearing up someone's liver or running like hell in mindless terror, but not so hot for the kind of clear-headed strategy, pinpoint accuracy, total concentration, and perfectly coordinated finesse required in most sports. So by listening to relaxation response, flotation can help put the athlete in a calm and shapeable, steady, centered, alert, totally concentrated state of the mind that allows them to work at peak efficiency. And this obviously translates into both the business world and obviously into the world of high performance athlete, basically. And this is something that we noticed with one of our athletes, for example, as well. So basically last year we had one of the female GB rowers that came in, and she was, I guess she's been she's overtrained. So she's been probably done too much, and she was definitely feeling it physically, and mentally she was a bit drained as well. So she floated with us maybe 4 or 5 times over maybe like 6 weeks. And then she had, I think, one more float before she had the Rowing World Cup. I can't remember which, I think it might have been the Rowing World Cup number 2. But basically, before her float session, or before last float session, we said to her that she should put her fingers in a certain position. So, like creating a physical anchor. So, like you do if you were seeing a hypnotherapist, for example, they might give you like a set anchor. If someone's feeling anxious, then if you put your fingers in a certain position, or if you're touching your hand in a certain way, then that would act as a trigger to then calm your mind down. So we gave her we used the same idea while she was floating, and then when she went to do her race, then when we spoke to her afterwards, she said that she'd tried that technique, and then just closed her eyes and then put her fingers in the same position, and then which put her head back into the tank. So it created that link to that calm and relaxed state. And then she went on to win silver, which is pretty good, I guess.
I mean, silver is amazing, but just so I understand this clearly, you basically, I guess in neuro-linguistic programming, they would call it an anchor. But yes, you created an anchor for her so that she could access this state of call it relaxation, clarity, whatever you will, either before or after the race or just at a time when she needs it. And that's how she won silver. Do I have that right?
Correct. Yes. Basically, yeah. So we gave her the anchor. She used it while in the float session. So while she was floating, she held her hand in that position. And then just before the race, I think like 5 minutes before, and sat in the boat, and she had her eyes closed for a minute, and then just held the fingers in that position, and then just to slow everything down, just so she can get her focused, and then just do what she needed to do and get a medal, basically.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a little things that you don't. I mean, what I like to say personally is that the float tank I see is more of a tool. So depending on what people want to use it for, then it's they can do that. So like I said, with the recovery aspect of it, or in the preparation, it just creates that perfect kind of space where people can just be, because there's no judgment from anything. There's no, there's nothing. It's just you in that moment. So you can visualize in your head how you want a race to go, how you want like a presentation to go, how, ideas will come up, or it gives you a different place. Your mind's a lot freer to kind of focus on different things. So if people are working on like a project, for example, they might be able to look at things in a slightly different perspective, because there's not that excess noise from like teams that they're working with or other people. You can separate elements of yourself and then just to kind of improve your performance. And like presentations or whatever you want to apply yourself to, anything from arts and music to elite levels of sport. Basically, it's amazing.
Excellent. Now, I guess because I'm a measurement geek, do you mind touching on how we're able to measure some of these benefits? Because other than getting a 24-hour cortisol test right afterwards, I'm kind of struggling to see how we can measure these other benefits associated with floating.
Well, some of them, it's to some degree, it's kind of difficult. So, for example, for myself, so a few weeks ago, I did like an overnight float session. So, I use my Oura ring to track my sleep.
Let's talk about this, because I want to hear about the overnight floating session, and I have both the old gen and the new gen Oura ring, so I would love to hear what the results were.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so interestingly, I did it twice. So I did it on a Tuesday evening first, and I did like a 4.5 hour session. So that was more of a, I guess for me, a test run. And I had a great session, don't get me wrong, but I was really glad because the ring at that point didn't really record any data for that night. Personally, I think that's mainly due to the fact that my hand was in the water. Obviously, the Oura ring, this is generation 2, by the way, may or may not have obviously picked up the body temperature, because obviously the water is slightly different. Whether there was water and some salt between the ring sensors on my finger, where the ring moved, I'm not 100% sure, but for the Tuesday night, I didn't pick up any data. So the next night, the Wednesday, I decided to do I tried to aim for a bit longer, to like maybe 6.5, 7 hours basically. And I then rested, rather than having my hand in the water, I rested my hand. I had like a small air little pillow, I guess. So I rested more on my hand just on there. I deflated it enough so it was about as close to the water as I could get it without my hand getting wet. But in terms of the actual sleep-wise, I managed, let's see, I think it's about 6.5 hours sleep with, I think it's about 30 minutes of deep sleep. But, in terms of my actual sleep quality, and I think having floated on the night before obviously would have had an impact, because I would have been slightly more prepared to be in that kind of environment. So in terms of I'm just bringing up a few details here now actually, but in terms of the actual Oura ring itself, let's have a look. Just going to grab some info for you. I measured it in 2 different ways actually. Beforehand, I used heart math. So just so I know, so I can measure my heart rate variability basically, and I measured my heart rate variability after, just so I could see the coherence level, basically, and see how much of an impact that it had before. So I'll go through some of the data just to,
Yeah, sure. So just for people who are unfamiliar, the heart math is essentially, are you using the inner balance or are you using the Pro?
Pro.
Okay, so with that, you're just clipping something to your ear and you're going through a series of breathing exercises which effectively measure the coherence in terms of, I guess you'd call them waves, between your brain and your heart. Now, I'm very curious, Michael, what were the before and after differentials?
Okay, so let's have a look. So my heart rate was 66 BPM beforehand, right? So on like Heart Math, which is the M-Wave Pro, so it measures coherence. So you get a coherence ratio basically, which is the red, blue, and green. So obviously red is like not very coherent. Obviously blue's all right, it's kind of average, and green is like great. It's like it's the more green, obviously, the better, right? So I had at the beginning, I had 15 in red, which is obviously low coherence, 67 in blue, and about 18 in green, right? So obviously, with my high level coherence, my green and blue obviously be higher, right? So this is more to me to gauge more of a baseline score, and I can say that like post float. My average heart rate was down to 60. My red, which is my low coherence, was 9. Medium was 61, and my coherence high level was like 30. So there was definitely a shift and an increase. So from that side of things, you can see that it has had a positive effect in terms of my thought, my thinking, my heart rate variability, breathing, everything's more balanced, basically.
Interesting. That's very cool. Now, going back, I guess, on the Oura Ring, do we want to talk about that now, or is it something that we'd have to maybe link to in the show notes?
It's up to you. I've written a full blog post about it online, so it's all there, like all the data you would need, basically. So everything from like my sleep score. So like my REM sleep, I had like an hour and 20 minutes. I woke up like once, and that was obviously, I guess, at the end. So my sleep score was like 78, and my heart rate went from like 67, dropped down to about 59. So it's quite interesting to see how the measurement of heart rate on the Oura Ring, from when I finished to measuring the heart rate variability with Heart Math after, is more or less the same. So which means shows, okay, well, obviously the Oura Ring is pretty accurate in terms of measuring like heart rate, for example.
And then I guess to just give some people some context, how does this differ from your average sleep score? Let's not focus on sleep score, just sort of differentials that you've noticed based on a night in your bed versus a night in the float tank. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah, sure. I think, it's difficult to kind of say exactly, but I think the impact or the difference, it is not that much difference in terms of, and don't forget, this is kind of an extreme version, because like most people don't do like 6.5, 7, 8 hours of sleeping in a float tank. So it was just interesting for me to see as a comparison, see if it was possible and what kind of results, because I've been wanting to know for like a while and I've not had the informational technology to be able to do that. But we have looked at other different studies. We actually did a small study ourselves with the Stress Management Society, and basically we did a similar thing, but we measured the heart rate variability before a float session, after a float session, and this was over a period of like 4 to 6 weeks, like one float a week. So that included other specific questionnaires as well, to questionnaires, interviews, measuring heart rate variability. Obviously, measuring the blood aspect would have been slightly tricky. But yeah, even we used the Heart Math to record the HRV and the coherence pre and post float as well. So in some respects, with looking at the heart rate variability, that's quite an interesting way of kind of measuring the pre and post float. I'd like to be able to measure the heart rate variability during a float session.
Yeah, I've I've been in touch with the guys from Aura, and there's possible that you're going to be able to get the instantaneous HRV relatively soon. I've heard later this year, although it may be early next year. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that, if it's going to be on demand, it's whether or not there's going to be an option to have that continuing recording. Like, I mean, I was looking at there's another device that's you can wear on your chest that will consistently measure your heart rate variability, basically. I'll have to try and I'll see if I can dig out the name of it, but it's a company in the UK. It's a wireless one as well, but it would measure obviously heart rate variability throughout the session. But I mean, obviously, the equipment, the device is like about £1,000. So yeah. I mean, if you're going to be using it for a short period of time, it's kind of fine. But I mean, yeah, it's one of those things. I might end looking to invest in getting one in the future, just to do more research here, because I think it'd be quite interesting to look at how the heart rate variability changes during the session, as opposed to going, okay, well, this is before, this is after. We have no idea what goes on.
Once you have that data, I would love to see it. That would be very cool. So, Michael, if you don't mind, I want to talk a little bit about something that I've experienced in the tank, and I think you and I before this were discussing it. You have as well. Let's talk about the psychedelic, almost psychedelic. And by the way, we're not talking about doing drugs and going into the tank. We're talking about just what happens in the tank. What is the reason why I may sometimes see random colors or have an almost psychedelic trip inside of a tank?
It's a very interesting question as well, and I just want to point out that this doesn't happen as often as people think it does. I think some people are slightly more susceptible than others. There isn't anything that's necessarily different about each person, but I think it's it's different for everybody. And you mentioned to me that you said you've seen colors like purple, right?
Yeah, exactly. Purple, bright lights in a dark tank, which doesn't make any sense to me. But
yeah. I mean, it's the whole thing's amazing. I mean, you can see anything. People have seen kind of colors, shapes, faces, animals, to full blown kind of like lucid dreams, basically. But the lucid dreaming aspect, I think, is a lot rarer, and that's something that I think is possible over maybe a longer session. So, maybe 2 hours or 2 hours, maybe more. But I mean, like you said, you don't obviously need to see how many psychedelic drugs to start seeing many colors and objects that aren't really there, really. I mean, 15 minutes of near total sensory deprivation could bring on hallucinations in many otherwise sane individuals. So if you think in a float tank, this time is extended, so the chances are a little higher for someone to experience these visual hallucinations. And there are obviously a number of factors that could have an impact. So this includes whether they have music throughout a session or not. I personally like to float without music during a float session. So I don't know how you float.
No music for me, except for the one at the end, just to wake me up.
Awesome. Yeah, good. Excellent. So, obviously there's things like the temperature of the water as well that could have an impact on how perceptible it is to the individual and their current state of mind as well. So sometimes it's difficult because you're trying to balance all these different kind of factors to create that kind of optimum point to be able to create and have these visual hallucinations, basically. But I'd say you have to kind of go with the flow as well, and after a while, open your eyes. If you see something, try not to focus on it because it will disappear. That's the thing. As to why it happens, it appears that when confronted by lack of sensory patterns in our environment, we do have a natural tendency to superimpose our own patterns. So hallucinations happen when the brain misidentifies the source of what it's experiencing. So it's a concept that researchers call faulty source monitoring. So, I mean, this is the idea that hallucinations come about because we misidentify the source of our own thoughts. So basically, something that actually is initiated with us gets misidentified as being from the outside. So, and obviously some people are more prone to others, but there isn't any kind of particular reason or there's known why that happens. So, like, for example, I'm quite a creative individual. So I like my science, I like my tech, but I also love my art. So I like, like painting and I like music, and I like anything that's visual and creative. So I'm quite lucky that I have a kind of a balance of both. So I imagine that some of my more visual and most vivid kind of float sessions and visual hallucinations are triggered because of that part of my creative side inside of my brain that likes to create, stories and build things, But I mean, yeah, if you had any kind of really interesting visual kind of hallucinations or visuals and stuff?
Sure. I always describe this to people as if I were in, and there's one of two ways I can take this, but let's go with the one that people may be more familiar with. There's certain scenes in Austin Powers where they have these almost psychedelic tie-dye colors popping up on a screen. And not to say that Austin Powers is a good movie by any means, but it was just the thing that came to mind. The other direction I was going to go was a Jimi Hendrix album cover. So,
okay, yeah.
But if you look at just my experiences of floating, most of the time, within the first 15 to 30 minutes, I will get these really deep, vivid color pictures that come out in front of me, which to me, you're sitting in a black tank, it doesn't really make sense. But you get all these blues, purples, yellows, very bright lights, and then all of a sudden, and maybe it's because, as you alluded to earlier, I'm just focusing on it, it goes away. And it's very interesting because after that moment, I am completely relaxed. And it's almost as if I could cut my session short, but it's intriguing to me. And I had to ask the question because I was wondering if it's just me and my interesting mind, or if everybody or some people experience it.
I think there's a good portion of people that experience it. I mean, for example, I had a client the other day that came literally like 2 days ago, and he said he was in the middle of his float session. His eyes were closed, all the lights are off, there's no music. He said he started seeing like a red kind of mist like in front of him. This was the eyes closed first, right? And then he said he opened his eyes, and then he said the mist was still there, and it was kind of in front of him. So, and then that's the thing, he said he started focusing on it more. And the more he focused on it, then it vanished, disappeared. I kind of get this feeling, because what you said is that, okay, well, basically you see all the visual aspects, and after that you suddenly feel relaxed. So in some ways it might be just like a build-up of like your brain just like purging, like visual, like a build-up of like all your thoughts, but combined into like one thing that's kind of like exploding, like a supernova or something like that, man. It's just kind of like, and then suddenly you have this massive build, and then suddenly it just disappears, it's gone, and then it's just this massive sense of calm, But it could be, because if you think about it, if you look at people when they have like dreams, and you can look at dream interpretations as well, like it could be that certain colors, patterns, certain images and things pop up are related to certain emotions or certain experiences that we can't necessarily either A, put into words, or B, it's just a feeling. And then once that goes, then it's kind of like it's gone, And some of them can be really positive and really good, and sometimes it can be really captivating and interesting. But obviously, like we look into dreams and things, then certain images will just pop up, and we're like, what the hell is that all about? And we have no understanding of it, but we feel better after it's happened and it's gone. Which, I mean, that's kind of my slight explanation. It might be, I have no idea, but I mean that's something I kind of might interpret it in my way. I've had quite a few interesting visual sessions. I mean, I could tell you my most vivid one if you want.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
So we have a float room that's at the back of the center. So it's a bit further away from the front door and what have you. So this is what I think. I'm lying in a float tank with my head at the back. So there's a shower outside the float tank on the back wall. Right. So during my float session, there's a point where I feel like someone's shining a very, very bright light in my face. So this has happened on like 3 different occasions now. So I kind of recognize that as soon as I open my eyes, something's going to happen. I know now that what the trigger is. Yeah. So I then open my eyes, and this is the most like messed up, crazy thing. Yeah. I was lying there, and then I know the lights in the room were off. Yeah. There was nothing on. Yeah, I opened my eyes. I could literally see through the whole lid, the whole top of the pod. It was like, you imagine like the force field around the Death Star. Like, it was like that, literally around the edges. You could see the kind of shimmering edges of the pod. I could see the lights in the ceiling were on. I could look down and I could see the shower. I could see the whole room. But I know, like, that everything was off. In my mind, I know everything was off, yeah? I could see the room. I felt like I was drifting down really slowly. And then as I was looking up, then the walls started bending in on themselves. So then the lights all started, like, joining up together until it just disappeared into, like, to darkness again. And then I kind of turned out. But this is the weird strange thing is my eyes were open the whole time.
Wow. That's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, man. I've had other ones that are similar, you know, with like little flames appeared and smoke the smoke's changed and morphed into like shapes like wolves or animals or and things like that. You know, it's just yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's my overactive like mind, and I just want to like just get everything out. But it was the most like weird, surreal kind of experience. But I was not. It's like I was no longer like connected to my physical self. It was like I felt like I was lying on top of me, which sounds crazy, right? But
I think for anyone listening out there, if you're particularly scared about these sites, I wouldn't be. And in fact, it's actually quite an enjoyable experience. And as I alluded to earlier, on the other side of whatever this color explosion that occurred was relaxation. And for a while, it was very hard for me to do that. And through floating or sensory deprivation tanks, whatever your preferred nomenclature, I was able to experience this relaxation. So I do encourage people to check it out. But one last question for you, Michael, before we get into my final five, is how long do you recommend people float for?
If I'm honest, I mean, it's obviously it's going to be different for everybody, right? So, like for most of our regular clients, they find like an hour is enough because it helps set them up for like the month, and it just kind of helps to kind of rebalance. It's like they have this whole build-up of work and life and all this stuff going on. And after a while, what we tend to see, usually after maybe like 4 or 5 float sessions, that people are starting to ask, or they're not finding like an hour of floating is enough. So then they'll look at coming for like 90 minutes or 2 hours. I mean, 90 minutes is a good happy medium. 90 minutes is my, obviously that's my kind of average if I float maybe once, twice a week. I'd like to do obviously 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. Obviously it's more to do with the timing and things really realistic than anything else, but I tended to find that an hour and a half to 2 hours for me is good. And that sets me up nicely. I think it's the same as if you're going to be practicing like yoga or meditation or whatever. You want to, like the first few times you're kind of getting used to it. You're learning more about yourself, how your body works, how your mind works, all that sort of things. So once you kind of get to a point where it's like, okay, you can really get into the float sessions, probably usually after say third or fourth, then, people kind of go, okay, they really wish they could stay longer, or they'll start booking and they'll do an hour and a half sessions. So I think it's some people, they can just go in, they can do an hour and a half, no problem. Some people, they find it's a bit harder to switch off or disconnect or be alone with themselves for an hour. So sometimes it takes that a little bit longer, but yeah.
Michael, now I want to go into the final five, and these are sort of rapid fire questions that I ask all of our guests, and it's always interesting to hear what comes out of this. So the first question is, what is health to you?
Well, health is where the mind and body are in high levels of coherence. So working together to improve our own physical and mental well-being, whilst creating a positive environment for ourselves for optimal personal growth.
Excellent. What aspect of health do you wish people would be more aware of?
I think I'd say their minds. I mean, obviously fitness is quite a huge thing, and mental health is massive, and it can obviously have a massive impact on our physical health. Hence why, obviously, that's why I'm so passionate about floating, and speaking from my own experience. And we have an almost say limitless selection of entertainment distraction as well. It's easy to find ourselves in the constant state of busyness than it is to do nothing. So, not only can we learn to embrace nothingness, it can help to enhance our minds, alter our perceptions of time, allow us to lead, more happier and fulfilling lives. So basically what I'm trying to say is that we need to learn to accept ourselves, and gain a deeper understanding of our own habits and behaviors before we can make, the necessary change needs to become happier and healthier.
You may be biased on this one, but I have to ask, what's your top trick for enhancing focus?
Apart from floating, you mean?
Like I said, you may be biased.
Yeah, no, 100% no. Well, I mean, there's a simple other daily practice that I pretty much do every day, and that's the ability. And this little daily practice not only makes a dramatic change to mindset and the operating state, but it can help alter your attention ability to literally allow you to see things that other people miss. So I don't know if you've heard this before, but it's called attentional training.
I haven't. Do you mind educating me a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, attentional training comes in many forms, both active and seated. So the critical elements always include the cultivation of high levels of sustained focus that are required either by instruction or by the intrinsic nature of the activity. I can explain a simple technique if you want.
Yeah, sure. Why don't we give people just a real quick example?
Okay, so this is like a simple technique, and it's to help you get started with a very basic, accessible 10-minute daily seated practice. Yeah. So, you can probably use this either as a daily practice, or you can use it even in preparation before you go into a float session, or even within the first 10 minutes of a float session, for example. So, 1, find a quiet place. 2, sit in a comfortable upright position with your hands on your knees, or you're lying down, then that's fine. Close your eyes and take 10 breaths. So letting your exhale get longer and longer with each one. So starting at a very gentle pace, begin to count backwards from 100 by threes, saying each number softly or just sublingualizing them and with every inhale and exhale. So, for example, if you inhale and think and say another 100, exhale, think and say 97, inhale, think and say 94, and so on. So if you get a number wrong, just let it go, say the right one, and move on. So once it becomes easy, or a few days a week in, pick up the pace a bit until it becomes easy again. Bump the top number up by 25 and keep practicing and bumping pace until it gets easy again. Keep at it until the whole practice takes about 20 minutes and give it a few weeks. So let go of any expectations and see what unfolds. So, like I said, you can do this at the start of a float session, during a float session, or even, in essence, it is kind of a form of meditation, but it helps to enhance your focus, basically. So if done right, you can obviously, it helps lower your blood pressure and levels of stress hormones, and your attention becomes highly focused.
Excellent. What's your favorite book on high performance?
I'd have to say that would be Mind Lift by Casper van der Meulen.
Good choice.
Yeah, his book's awesome for personal development. I was quite lucky that we managed to hang out with Casper last year. He's friends with a few other friends of mine at the Biohackers Summit in. Were
you in Helsinki?
Yes. I was working there. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was working backstage and stuff with all the speakers and things. And so it was good. All my few friends were there, and they had their own stands because they all lived in Helsinki as well. So, but it was cool. The guy's a legend, man. The advice given, is instantly applicable. Especially advice for my daily life. It's not some kind of high concept, grand ideas that are only great in theory, but practical advice for increasing your productivity, health, and a lot more. I think it's written in a very down to earth manner. With page counts and approximate reading times for each section, so it makes it easy to read, and I can fit it into my schedule. And it's things like that I find kind of more beneficial to me, especially running the centre and doing like talks and being involved with this thing and that thing. Then time is obviously quite precious, so it's kind of being able to use different techniques to maximise my time, so I can work more efficiently, more productive, and achieve more by doing less.
Absolutely. Aren't we all looking to achieve more by doing less? Just one thing on the Mind Lift side. I've had a chance to speak with Casper very briefly, and I'm trying to get him on the podcast one of these days. But Casper wrote that book with some very strong intentions around the page counts. And I have to say, it makes the book very, very easy to read. And I forget exactly what he did, but the page counts are constructed in such a way that it's very easy to pick up. And when I've talked to Casper about this, he said that some of the reactions he's gotten from people are anything from "thank you for bringing me to read again" to this has absolutely changed my life. So that's definitely a book that people should pick up.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, it's in our library in the Float Center, it's on our table, so people are constantly reading it and picking it up, and just and it's great because, like you say, you can just you can jump in, and it is really easy to read and really accessible, and it's not because there are a number of books out there. I wouldn't say like a lot, but there are a certain number of books out there that you have to kind of be into that kind of area, into that field a bit to kind of, with health and stuff, to be able to access it and have a greater understanding of it. You know what I mean? Whereas this, it's like instantaneously, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. I can apply that. I can do this. Make these small changes, and bigger things will happen. So this is kind of some of the principles that I kind of work from. And any opportunity is out there. Just for me, I kind of love to take it, and then I can work out afterwards how to do it, and then. As long as I go for it, you can always make a plan on how to then achieve that after the opportunity's been taken.
Absolutely. So, Michael, where can people find you?
Okay, so if you're in the UK, we are based in a lovely place called Pangbourne, which is a small village, which is in West Berkshire. So we're quite close to London. We're about maybe 45 minutes from West London. So we've got people that travel here by train, by car. We're quite about 40 minutes from like Heathrow and Gatwick. So we have people that come in and fly in, and then they'll come and float here before heading into London or for business or work. But yeah. I mean, we're motorway like 15 minutes away. Like we're close, and we're in the countryside, so it's nice and chilled and relaxed, and you don't have to head back out straight into like a busy like town or city centre. We're just super chilled. We have like the River Thames running around, meadows and all sorts of stuff, man. It's like the most like chilled place. Like you can come out and just like you go out and sit down by the river, have some food, relax, man. It's a beautiful little place down here, man.
Sounds idyllic to me. I may have to come visit you guys soon.
Oh yeah, when you come down, come.
Absolutely. So for all listening, the show notes can be found at decodingsuperhuman.com/float. That's FLOAT. I don't know any other way to spell float. But Michael, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a wonderful education and really a deep dive into floating, which is something that I've wanted to do for so long. So thank you so much. And I want to acknowledge you for all the really good work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, man. It's been a great pleasure. I've listened to your show from pretty much from the start, and I love the work you do, man. It's awesome.
You're making me blush, but to all the superhumans out there listening, have an absolutely epic day. Superhumans, before you go, can I ask 2 favors? Did you enjoy that episode? If so, can you send me an email at podcast@decodingsuperhuman.com? Provide any feedback, positive or negative. I would love to hear from you. And for those of you who have really taken advantage of that, I respond to each email. Secondly, if you did enjoy the episode, can you head on over to iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, any one of your favorite podcast listening platforms, and give Decoding Superhuman a 5-star rating. It would really be appreciated. And then finally, for those of you who are looking at taking an informed approach to health, head on over to decodingsuperhuman.com. Check out what we have going on over there, and if you want to schedule a free 15-minute discovery call with me, you're going to have that option. Superhumans, have an absolutely epic day, and remember, as always, choose health.